Welcome to the Wastewater Services Contractor Orientation. We've prepared this presentation to help you understand what we do, the city's expectation of contractors, site-specific health and safety, and emergency procedures. Let's get started.
The City of Guelph and Wastewater Services are committed to the health and safety of everyone involved with or impacted by our activities. In order to achieve this, both management and workers, including contractors, must all be committed to actively reducing the risk of workplace injury. Our commitment as management is to take every precaution reasonable for the protection of workers under our direction. It is fundamental that all workers recognize and accept that they also have a responsibility to work safely and in compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as well as the City of Guelph's policies and procedures. Further, we ask everyone on site to report unsafe conditions and practices to their site contact immediately. Remember, safety is a shared responsibility. Workplace accidents and injuries can be prevented. We can accomplish this together through commitment, communication, and a strong safety culture. I invite you to join Wastewater Services in making safety a way of life.
Wastewater Services Overview. What do we do?
Wastewater treatment is a crucial part of City of Guelph's operations. The wastewater treatment facility provides treatment of domestic, commercial, institutional, and industrial wastewater collected from the City of Guelph and the Township of Guelph-Eramosa. Using gravity and lift stations, the system brings wastewater to our plant for treatment through a series of processes before treated water is eventually released to the Speed River.
This is an overhead view of our facility, which spans several acres. There are several key features of the site, which include 4 wastewater treatment plants, open tanks within each plant, a series of underground tunnels, a transformer substation, maintenance shop, laboratories, various outbuildings and walkways, stairs, and piping installations.
Contractor responsibilities. What do we expect?
Anyone conducting work on Wastewater Service Division property must adhere to the City of Guelph's Contractor Safety Program, which includes the following documentation at minimum: an annual Wastewater Services orientation, a copy of your WSIB clearance certificate, a certificate of insurance showing at least $5 million general liability, and the City of Guelph named as additional insured once annually. A completed copy of Form 2 once annually, other documents such as Ministry of Labor Form 1000 or a copy of your Notice of Project or Hazard Assessments may be required. Failure to provide these documents will result in work being delayed until they are received and verified. Take this moment to check with your city contact and verify that they have received all of the paperwork required.
To better manage risk under OHS legislation, the City of Guelph may allocate or retain the role of project manager or prime contractor on construction projects. The project manager or prime contractor bears the responsibility to ensure that everyone on the worksite follows occupational health and safety law, City of Guelph policies, and other rules of the worksite. We also expect that project managers or prime contractors ensure all contractors, subcontractors have provided the required documentation, conduct a pre-start meeting with all workers, notify anyone engaged in work of known potential designated substances, monitor activities in the worksite at regular intervals for compliance, coordinate activities among contractors when more than one contractor is working in close proximity, inform their contact of injuries, illnesses, incidents, including environmental incident.
Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, workers have a general duty to take responsibility for their personal health and safety, meaning they must not behave in a way that would endanger themselves or others. This includes, but is not limited to, working in compliance with the Act and its regulations, using any equipment, protective devices, or clothing required by the employer, informing the employer or supervisor of any known missing or defective equipment or protective device that may be dangerous, reporting any known workplace hazard or violation of the Act to the employer or supervisor, not removing or ineffective any protective device required by the employer or by the regulations.
Access to the site is restricted. All visitors must follow our security procedures so that everyone stays safe. Sign in at the administration building when arriving on site, and sign out prior to leaving for any reason, including breaks, lunches, etc. Your visitor's badge must be worn visibly at all times. Visitors' badges, keys, or gate remotes must be returned when leaving site. Work must be conducted between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., Monday to Friday, unless other arrangements have been made. You must stay within your designated work area. Do not wander the site or enter any buildings without prior authorization from your city contact.
The following rules have been put in place in order to ensure the safety of everyone on site. Contractors may not use tools or equipment belonging to the City of Guelph. The city has a zero tolerance policy for alcohol and other intoxicating substances. No intoxicating substances are permitted on site, nor is anyone who is under the influence of such substances. Obey all signs, including non-smoking signs, barricades, and caution tape. Do not distract employees from performing their work unless it's necessary for their safety. Maintain a clean and orderly work area. Do not block doors, exits, fire extinguishers, first aid stations, eye wash stations, or AEDs. If you have any questions, ask your city contact. While conducting work for wastewater services, you must dress in a manner that will provide an adequate level of protection for any hazard that you may encounter. This includes your personal protective equipment, or PPE. All contractors must provide their own PPE. The need for PPE must be assessed based on the nature of the hazards present, taking into account the individual, job, site conditions, applicable legislation, and standards. Required PPE includes safety footwear in all locations aside from the administration building at all times, eye protection when working in areas that have flying particles, objects, or dust, when working with chemicals, or when working near hazardous radiation, for example, welding. Hearing protection when working in areas that have noise levels above 85 dBA, for example, the pump rooms, or when conducting work that generates noise levels in excess of 85 dBA. Head protection when there is a risk of head injury or falling objects, at all times if the work is being conducted constitutes a construction project, and at all times around the base of the digesters. Respirators when exposed to dust, caustics, or organic vapors, or when sufficient ventilation is not available, for example, when spray painting, welding, grinding, or sandblasting. Fall protection equipment such as lanyards and harnesses when there is a risk of a fall from a height of 3 meters or greater. Site hazards. What do you need to be aware of?
The nature of our operations presents various safety hazards that you need to be aware of. Pay attention as we discuss some of the hazards you may be exposed to on site and how to manage and mitigate that risk. Please note that any high hazard work requires authorization and a risk assessment and work plan. High hazard work includes the following: designated substances, hazardous energies, confined space entries, working at heights, including the use of elevated work platforms, hot work, and excavation and trenching.
In order to protect against biological hazards and prevent the spread of illness, it is extremely important to maintain appropriate personal hygiene practices, including washing hands prior to eating, drinking, smoking, touching your face, etc.
Designated substances are present on site. If disturbed, these materials have the potential to be hazardous to human health. Prior to the start of work, your city contact will inform you of any confirmed or suspected designated substances in your work area. In turn, you must provide your employees and subcontractors with this information. You must review any reports given to you and conduct a pre-start hazard assessment alongside your city contact to determine if the work will impact any designated substances. If so, you must make plans to abate the material or mitigate the effects. Do not disturb or remove any designated substances without authorization. If a designated substance is disturbed, don't attempt to clean it up. Tell your city contact immediately. Note that all hazardous materials are not necessarily identified in the designated substances surveys.
Hazardous chemicals can be found in various locations throughout the wastewater treatment facility. These include potassium hydroxide, sodium biosulfite, sodium hypochlorite, and ferric chloride. Additionally, gas hazards such as methane, oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, chlorine, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide are present on site. Your site contact will inform you of the risks associated with gases and chemicals in your work area and any precautions that must be taken. In turn, you must provide your contact with detailed information about the work you are doing and the products that you are bringing on site. Your site contact may request copies of safety data sheets and proof of WMS training. Due to high noise levels, there are areas within the wastewater treatment facility where hearing protection is required, such as the cogeneration facility, pump rooms, and around generators when running. These areas are marked with signage. Please put on the appropriate hearing protection prior to entering areas with high noise levels.
Beware of moving vehicles, including Kubotas and forklifts. Set up a visible work area using pylons and signage when working roadside or along traffic routes. Operate motor vehicles in a safe manner. Obey stop signs and do not exceed the facility speed limit of 20 kilometers an hour. Park in designated areas and do not idle your vehicle or leave it running while unattended. Stay behind all barriers that surround tanks, pits, clarifiers, etc. to prevent risk of injury or drowning. Do not climb beyond barriers for any reason.
Hazardous energy exists in many forms, including electrical, chemical, hydraulic, gas, pneumatic, gravitational, and potential. All energy sources and potential energy sources must be eliminated, controlled, or isolated to a level that ensures the safety of the worker. Make sure you follow the applicable laws, regulations, and the safety procedures established by the City of Guelph, and follow lockout-tagout protocols that meet or exceed those of the city. All electrical equipment and installations must be in conformance with electrical safety standards. Lockout devices and tags must be used and be clearly identifiable. If you are uncertain about sources of hazardous energy or how to control any potential sources of hazardous energy, consult your city contact before initiating work.
A confined space is a fully or partially enclosed space that is not designed or constructed for continuous human occupancy and in which atmospheric hazards may occur because of its construction, location, contents, or because of the work that is being done inside the space. Confined spaces prevent hazards that can be immediately dangerous to life and health. The wastewater treatment plant has several types of confined spaces, and they are one of the site's most significant hazards. Types of confined spaces on site include tanks, pits, totes, silos, digesters, underground pits, and crawl spaces. Confined spaces are not necessarily enclosed structures. Open tanks can be just as dangerous as enclosed ones. Do not enter a confined space unless you are trained to do so and without authorization from your site contact. Prior to doing so, you must provide proof of training, suitable equipment, a pre-start hazard assessment, which you will complete with your site contact, a confined space entry plan and permit, coordination documents if required, and all sources of hazardous energy must be identified and controlled prior to entry.
Any of the following constitute working at heights: working near an open edge of a mezzanine, pit, manhole, or tank, working from a ladder 3 meters or higher, working on a scissor lift deck or other aerial platforms, working on the roof within 2 meters of the edge, working on the top of an outdoor tank or tankers at 3 meters or higher, any other work performed at a height 3 meters or higher without protective barriers, guardrails to prevent falls. Working at heights must be authorized by your site contact, who will conduct a risk assessment with you prior to starting work. You must adhere to all industry regulations concerning working at heights and will be asked to provide your own PPE, proof of training, and equipment inspection.
EWP and lifting devices must be operated by competent workers. All EWPs and lifting devices must be up to date on required inspections, certifications, and maintenance. Your site contact may ask to see copies of training, inspection, and maintenance records. Barriers and spotters shall be used to protect workers and other people in or around the work area. Non-electrical workers must stay at least 10 feet away from overhead power lines. Electrical workers must de-energize, insulate power lines, or use proper PPE and tools.
Hot work is a work activity that has the potential to produce a source of ignition, such as an open flame or spark, such as welding, torch cutting, brazing, soldering, grinding, non-explosion proof electrical equipment. Please don't conduct hot work without authorization. Required control measures include hot work permit signed by a management rep, ventilation and purging of area, remove combustible and flammable materials from immediate work area, testing the area for LEL and oxygen level. LEL should be less than 5% and oxygen should be less than 23%. Warning others in the area, fire suppression on hand, fire watch and inspection area up to 30 minutes following completion of hot work. Emergency procedures reviewed and escape route planned. First aid kit on hand. When conducting excavation work that requires a worker to enter a trench, pit, or other subgrade area where there is a potential for collapse, the work area shall be sloped, stepped, shored, or secured with a trench box to protect the safety of the worker. Excavation work must utilize all appropriate warnings such as caution tape, signs, and barriers. Rescue and emergency response plans must be in place and locates must be conducted prior to digging.
Incidents and accidents. How should you respond?
An incident is an injury, illness, property damage, spill, near miss. If you are involved in or witness an incident, report it to your contact immediately. If serious, secure the area to prevent any further injuries as long as it is safe to do so. Call 911. If someone is injured, notify the nearest City of Guelph employee to get assistance from a trained first aider. Your city contact will complete an incident report with you and will need to ask you specific questions about what happened. The purpose of the incident investigation is not to find fault or place blame, but to learn what happened to avoid a similar incident from happening in the future. We are equally concerned about any incident involving a contractor as we are with any incident involving one of our own employees.
A hazard is any source of potential harm or adverse effect to people, to organizations, or to the environment. If you observe a hazard, report it to your city contact immediately. The hazard or near miss will be documented and a corrective action will be applied. Once a hazard has been identified, follow all instructions from your city contact.
Familiarize yourself with the first aid station in your work area. If you are uncertain of the first aid station location, contact your city contact or a City of Guelph employee. Various employees have been trained in first aid and CPR and are qualified to assist you. First aid kits should only be opened by a qualified person unless there is an emergency. Immediately report all injuries to your city contact.
Emergency evacuation. How should you respond?
This slide provides the location of each of the muster points at Wastewater Services. Please familiarize yourself with the closest one to the location in which you are working. In the event of an alarm, it is important that you follow our evacuation procedures. Exit the building immediately using the nearest, safest exit. Remain calm and quiet. Close doors when exiting the building and stay with the other people evacuating the area. Do not take time to retrieve personal belongings. Immediately proceed to the nearest muster point for a head count, and then remain at the muster point until authorized to leave. Failing to hear your name could result in an oversight, leading to unnecessary facility search by EMS personnel.
This concludes our contractor safety orientation. We appreciate your time and ask that you work safely while on site. If you have any questions or concerns, please speak to your site contact.